Hi everyone, welcome to the last Sydney event for World Interaction Design Day. Thank you. I wonder if anyone's sticking around for the whole thing. That would be a pretty big ask. So hi to everyone that's checking in around the world. I'm Flynn. I've been doing a lot of the hosting today, but not for the last two. Took a little break. But I'm joined by Nick Gower.
Hi.
And Prue Jones.
Hello.
Who have both been kind enough to come back for this roundtable discussion, which essentially we've just picked apart a couple of the questions and a couple of the topics that we've already discussed earlier in the day, and we thought we'd just spend a little bit more time kind of breaking them down. And so for those that are new, jump into the chat. We would love to get some questions from you as well, so please don't hesitate to jump in there, and we'll have to figure out how we get those questions through. So I thought I might just start here with, yes, are we up? Yeah, cool. All right, hello. Good afternoon.
Hello.
Good evening, good night, wherever you are. We've been talking about trust and responsibility. Here we are on the roundtable. That visual would have been useful previously. As I said, some people who I adore are here with me, which is great. So just for those who are just kind of tuning in or just been around for a little bit, I just wanted to kind of recap what we're doing and why we're doing this. So World Interaction Design Day is a global event. I think there's about 115 events, digital and physical, happening at the moment. We're doing a 24-hour live stream that's kicked off in Sydney. It's been 7 hours and it will be 8 hours here. And then if you stay tuned right here on Behance, we're going to do a bit of a digital handover to Rufus and the team. Hey Rufus and Stephanie, who are going to pick up, and they're going to start their leg of the journey. Very excited to hand over to that team. And so there's going to be all sorts of content, great content coming from them. And then they're going to hand over to the US team. It just keeps going. It's kind of amazing. And we're talking about trust and responsibility at these physical events and also at this digital event. And I thought I'd just jump through and just bring up a couple of useful websites. So this is the IXDD event website, which has a little bit more information about what's happening. There are events happening here in Asia Pacific and around the world, and they'll be happening, throughout for the next 24 hours and so on. So check out this website, interactiondesignday.org. You can see all the upcoming events and find one close to you. So here is like a bit of a visual representation of all the events that are happening around the world. So check that out. Here in Sydney, if you're watching this and you're free tonight, there's this great event that's happening here in Sydney. We had Joe Ortez earlier on giving us a bit of an idea of what was happening there, but there's still some tickets available for that. So check it out, get along. And yeah, so let's go back. So we thought we'd start with a general kind of question, because we've been speaking about trust and responsibility. You sick of the word trust and responsibility yet? About and how it affects kind of our lives and working within teams and things like that. So whoever is the bravest might want to tackle this one first. But why is it important for all designers to be thinking about trust and responsibility?
Can I take this one?
Please.
Well, I think that trust and responsibility these days is just ticket to play.
Right.
If you're creating products, services, whatever kind of designer, flavor of designer that you are, trust and responsibility really needs to be foremost in your mind when you're developing something new or innovating on something existing, because the world is literally awash right now with product, services, everything's everywhere. And if you're not a trusted or responsible in the way that you approach design or what it is that your design is setting out to do, you don't have a seat at the table.
Right.
The standard is, the trust and responsibility and consciousness out there in society. People are so looking for these two characteristics in anything, consumer products, includes design products, whatever. These are really at the forefront as the world is changing. And as I said, I think it's really just ticket to play.
Yeah. What do you think, Nick?
Yeah, we'll add like a team member level as well, just in the way you kind of conduct yourself. I think it's super important to be intentional sort of about what you do, and like understanding the trust and responsibility being instilled in you just by having the opportunity to create something that perhaps millions of people are going to use is like really important. Thinking about, I think a lot of design process is somewhat designed to try and absolve the designer of responsibility sometimes.
Right.
Yeah.
We spend a lot of time doing like user testing and all these like really fantastic kind of like data gathering processes. And it can get to the point where you start to think, well, we've user tested it. It's like, it's good. But I think it's important to be intentional about the fact that you are a decision maker in the process of building things. If you're not making decisions and everything is just coming from user testing and stuff like that, then you're not a designer, you're like a researcher at that point. So if you're making decisions, you have to be really aware of that, and you need to be intentional about building trust and also taking your responsibility seriously.
And to that second point, that responsibility to the client as well, to ensure that they are on board with those decisions as well. It's like your responsibility to guide a client into making the right decisions when sometimes, they have very fixed ideas potentially about the outcome of your design process, and they might be wedded to something, but as it's the designer's responsibility to sort of say, hey, there may be unintended consequences or something like that. So to just, to guide that responsibly.
And how do you begin that process, I guess, with clients, or how do you learn that skill? Because that seems to be the crux of it, like working with a client and working with stakeholders, to use a corporate term, at the very beginning, and like taking them through this process. How?
Yeah, well, I mean, design is like a team sport now, right? I mean, when I went to uni, I suppose like some 15-ish years ago, or maybe a bit more than that, it was very much still that sort of like in the Swiss tradition, sort of Steve Jobsian approach to,
the hero designer.
The hero designer, like
Right.
the Don Draper approach. Whereas that doesn't, user testing is one of the nails in that particular coffin, but just more collaborative, more iterative, quicker paced of design, like cross-skilled, tackling more complex problems, which means one person can't possibly solve it, and all those sorts of things.
Absolutely. And also I think it's about expectation management as well, and setting out very clearly the terms up front of the engagement and how you will react with one another, which means saying there will be times you feel very uncomfortable in this process, and preparing them for that, because I think so many engagements or projects get derailed by something really uncomfortable comes up in the middle of it, and it just sort of throws everything off. But if you can prepare the ground ahead for that eventuality, really just make it clear that, especially with clients that aren't familiar with the process as well, design can be very messy and uncomfortable.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think that's like such an important point, and it's not just for clients; it's for all the like stakeholders. So it's for people whose lives are going to be affected by the implementation of that product or service. So people who, like, from the CEO to someone who works on the phones, they need to be taken along for that journey, because change is just fundamentally difficult.
Derails you every time.
Yeah. And finding like the whole design, one of the responsibilities we have, I suppose, is design things that actually happen. That's a real focus. Not just designing a great idea and handing over this amazing and true kind of product that's validated and ready to go, but to actually see it go live, to build the confidence and momentum in that product, internally and externally, to see it go out into the world and make like a difference. And so only 50% of your job is really to design the thing. The other 50% is to get it live, and that means it's I guess the root of your problem, root of your question, which is, as again, we're sitting in like a two-way, like kind of observation user test space right now, and on the other side of that glass mirror window thing, there's like 25 seats, and when we do user testing here, those seats are in some ways more important, or as important at least, as the two seats in here, or the thing that's being tested, because taking stakeholders and sort of more loosely defined stakeholders, people who are going to be implementing that project along for the journey, so that you can at the end of the project put forward some type of unintuitive solution, something that sounds wrong, which is kind of the beauty of design,
Yeah.
when you can find something that wasn't obvious.
Yeah.
And then you've taken people along that journey.
Yeah. I'm going to add another 50% on top of what you just said, but it might be exactly what you just said.
Please.
Where, I think you mentioned sort of change and change management previously. I mean, that is so important. The amount of times where, like you say, you design a product and it's this discrete thing that's finished and it goes out into the world, but there is no education there for the people that it will impact. More importantly, the people within the business who are now coping with this new thing in the ecosystem.
Well, the call center is the
exactly.
no one tells them that products go live.
Exactly. So it's so important to consider that entire ecosystem when you're designing, and sort of preempt any new processes that's going to require, all that kind of stuff. So it really, the process does not stop, as you said, when you hand over something beautiful, because it will always be something beautiful. It doesn't stop there. In fact, it's probably just the beginning.
Yeah, that's right. And I think like when you're building teams, you're sort of, particularly for a really important project or something like that, you tend to feel like you're faced with a choice between building like a small team that can like move quickly and prototype and be agile, kind of fly under the radar and get it done, or choose like a really big, broad, wide team that has like all the skills necessary to solve the problem sort of really, really well.
Yes.
But then risk it sort of never going live because you think people are going to, get confused and it'll be too much noise, etc. And I think the real goal is to build teams that take the best of that. They take the speed, and access that knowledge base of a wide group of people and can somehow blend those two, kind of those best of both worlds.
Yeah.
It's really important.
Yeah.
So like a lot of what we've talked about today, I've noticed, at Adobe, we talk about a lot about design. So being in the coalface and designing beautiful things and using the tools and things like that. A lot of these skills we're talking about could fall into the category of soft skills, right?
Yeah.
Like working with people, working with teams. So that leads me to my next question of, if you hire someone within your team, where does that learning come from? Are you looking for people that already have this kind of skill, or is that something that they need to learn, and people need to learn within your team or within your company?
You see this happen sometimes when you're working like in a really fast-paced environment, and it sort of relates back to what we were talking about before, is like preparing the ground ahead so that you avoid any messy situations. You forget to induct your hiring, like you assume that they'll just come in and naturally understand your culture and
It's like hit the ground running.
Exactly. And that is the biggest mistake ever, because it really, it's not fair either to new hires. You really have to induct them into the way that you work and what the expectations are and how you like to do things. I mean, they may bring their own ways of doing things that you had never considered, and but you need to at least start with that baseline. I think it's very unfair, and it does happen because everyone's so busy in getting the work done.
Yeah,
right.
Well, we hire for, first and foremost, for mindset. I think that's the hardest thing. Yeah, well, I think in product development in particular, there's sort of like four main kind of phases, like maybe not phases, but sort of mindsets that you cycle through over the course of an entire product lifecycle, from like understanding and validating a completely new opportunity to building a completely new thing, and putting that live, then optimizing and growing something, and then maintaining something. And those are four completely different types of people that want to work in those four environments.
Yeah.
And we work in those first two predominantly. And it means being really comfortable with uncertainty. It means being, having really strong opinions, but having them really loosely held. So being able to kind of, put forward a really well-formed argument and then really quickly change that argument based on new information. It means being obsessively passionate about moving forward and putting things live and taking good intentions and making them real, which sort of really forces you to blend that kind of empathy and entrepreneurialism in one go. So we sort of hire for that stuff, and then we figure hard skills we can teach.
Exactly, yeah. Much more important to have the right sort of fit in terms of exactly what you said.
Yeah.
Mindset that's a really great word.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think what we see is we see really fantastic designers start here sometimes that just have not the wrong mindset for the world, just the wrong mindset or a different mindset than our team.
Yeah.
We part, some months later, but good friends.
Yeah.
And
Mindsets are hard to teach.
yeah, and it's also like it's not about changing someone's mindset, because there's another place for them that will be perfect, you know, and they'll be more happy, and their kind of whole personality will be better suited too. And I think that's what's really interesting about team design and teamwork, is that you start to look at not how do I like cram this person and force them to do this thing,
Right.
which is more of a task and hard skill based kind of approach. How do I teach them this program? But how do I find the right problems for my team, and how do I find the right team for my problem? And that mission mindset fit thing is sort of critical, and also really sort of passionately interesting to me, because when you do see like that individual connect with that problem, you just know that it's going to be amazing. Like the outcome is going to be something special.
That's fantastic. It leads me to another question. Like we're sort of talking about building our team, and a lot of the trust on us is building, you know, or you and people out there, you know, the responsibility to try to build a team with trust. I know I'm jumping around a little bit, but also I'd be very, very interested in your relationship with clients as well, because sometimes, rarely, but sometimes clients might need to be fired, you know, because of perhaps a lack of trust between, and you have to talk about anything specific, obviously, but have you been in a situation where you have had to end a relationship with clients? Has it had anything to do with a lack of trust?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think we've definitely had to part ways with clients before for sort of various reasons. And I think the times when things get fiery is like when people are at their like people are just trying to do their best, like even when they're at their worst. You know, the people who are the fieriest about stuff care the most about things. And a huge portion of like our process and just design in general is about turning kind of detractors into challenges, trying to find that kind of bubbly fieriness. This isn't quite working. They're not trusting us. We're not in like simpatico here. And, you know, challenging them by being really receptive to their feedback and, you know, finding ways of engaging with them and hearing them, so that, you know, you turn them from like an aggressor or like into a challenger, someone who's there pushing you to do your best work.
Yeah.
I think where it does, you know, where it ends in parting ways in our experience is not so much about the trust, but it's mainly about you're looking for a different thing than us. You want someone with a different mindset. We are a challenger brand. We will help you push and change. When people want just like pure production, sometimes at that point we say, look, there's cheaper ways of doing this than using us.
Yeah, I think, well, for us, I think it's really all about relationships, and for relationships you have to have trust. So you kind of can avoid any of those situations where you need to part ways, and regardless of how, you know, what kind of client it is, if they have your trust, vice versa, then basically you can negotiate any situation, because they know that you've got the best interest at heart for the project, for them, for their business, for the outcome. It's really all about, they're coming back very neatly to the whole theme of this thing.
I love that.
It's really all about trust and those ensuing relationships that can only happen if trust is there. And I think you get into those sticky situations when there's mistrust and people, you know, don't, you know, it's like what your motivation for doing something is. I mean, and it's true for us. If you're doing something just for the money, you know, that will be obvious. If you don't have, if the client doesn't trust you to take their, you know, the well-being of their business and the outcome to heart, there's no point really being in the engagement at all.
Yeah,
cool. Just like to give a shout out to my man Rufus in Munich, about to do their live stream. Hey, mate.
Hey.
Got any questions? No, it's fine. No, I know you're busy. But very excited. So if you're just joining us, in about 40 minutes, they're going to be live. So very exciting kind of time. So we've done that question, didn't we? So I thought I'd jump through to this other question that I have cleverly pre-prepared, just based on some of the conversation we had. So we have talked a lot about trust and responsibility so far today, and I noticed that the Sydney event that's on is called Ethics in Design, Trust and Responsibility, which I quite like, because I like that they add the ethics just to like expand it out again. And so that kind of leads me through just within ethics. I thought we could talk about ethics just a little bit. And it leads me through to my question, Prue, because I know that you're the diversity and inclusion lead at Fjord. And so I'd like to find out a little bit from you, like, you know, how important it is to be working for a company that has an initiative like this, and what that means to you and the team.
Well, I think encouragingly, a lot of places, or many large design firms, I'm sure you have one, have an inclusion and diversity, at least, you know, a person or a program.
Yeah.
But it's everything. I mean, like, I mean, I couldn't work for a company that didn't believe that I deserved the same kind of affordances that somebody else did. And I think, yes, I'm not saying that, because gender is obviously a huge part of this. I don't think we're there with gender at all yet. I want to say even close to, but there is a way to go. But we can't forget that within that, there's inclusion. Sometimes it feels like there's a hierarchy. There's gender first, and then there's inclusion. But everything has to happen at once.
It's just like a mindset shift completely.
Absolutely. Yeah, so very intersectional about that. You know, it's not just women, and it's women of all sorts, you know, of backgrounds, and men too. So yeah, but I think that's the way forward, because if you want to work in business and, you know, you're servicing clients, consumers, you know, people are buying your products, they're going to want to buy from you if your organization, your product is reflective of the real world. And the real world is made up of different people. Yeah. So I think that's really important. I think you're doing yourself a disservice if particularly your design business is not diverse. And I think the example that I referenced before with the IKEA example of the Disables campaign, it's just like having a disabled person on your team. I mean, like, as I said before, you'll never put out an exclusionary product or service again. I mean, it just makes total sense to have a representative of everyone in society in your design team if possible. So it just you don't slip up and or waste effort. You deliver the right product. You know,
there's more points of view, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It's just if you've got as off your podcast last week with the team from Meld, they mentioned like a really nice phrase. It's like, if we've all got the same background, then we're just sharing the load. We're not really like adding new things. So you sort of cloned yourself 5 times if it's 5 of you.
Right.
But if you had 5 different people, and they were from different backgrounds and had different experiences and perspectives, then, you know, you've got 5 times the amount of kind of creative input as well, don't you?
Yeah. Which makes it 5 times as good.
Yeah, 5 times as good. Yeah.
5 times as good. I like that.
Yeah.
Greater than the sum of our parts.
That's right.
Thanks for the podcast shout out, by the way. Appreciate that. This is a question that came up earlier in chat, and I thought it was a good jumping off point to a question that does come up a lot, and I'm really interested in both of your perspectives on this. So the question was originally, totally out of context, by the way, forget who typed this earlier today, but according to you, what is the key factor that differentiates a product designer from any other designer, like UI/UX designer or a visual designer? And I can leave the question at that, or I can expand, but essentially I kind of want to talk about these titles and talk about, you know, do we need to learn everything, or are labels important like this? And I'm really interested in your take. I can ask more specifically if you like.
No, I've got an opinion. Yeah. I've always got an opinion on something like that. I think my personal perspective, MF's perspective, is that titles in design are disruptive and destructive to collaboration. I think in a much larger organization, you know, there might be room for, there might be need for that conversation to be a bit more nuanced, but for us, design means to designate, means to decide, it means to help move forward. We have visual designers who have come from, you know, like a purely UI background, and we give them the same opportunity that, you know, like our senior or lead product designers would. You know, what you mean when you say product designers. Like, we give them those same opportunities. We just would support them. We think of it just as a scale of experience in one direction and a scale of expertise in another. You know, in the same way as the diversity conversation comes up, there's some people who have like a much, just a more of an interest in delivering value centered around the physical interactions or digital interactions, or are really interested in policy design, but they're ultimately just working together to solve problems, and we just try and match the right person, level of experience and kind of skill set, with the right problem. And if we tried to put a label on every single one of those, everyone would have 10 titles because, like we've got someone...
Which you see sometimes out in the world.
Yeah.
Some people will have multiple, 1,000 titles.
Yeah, and I think like the empowerment here is that you can do whatever you want. Like you can solve the problems. Like working here, you can work on like a kids product, like a kids digital product for like a big national broadcaster one day, and then 2 weeks later be put on a policy design program writing policy in Canberra. But on the other side of it, it becomes super confusing about what your career progression is without titles. So I think that there is this sort of double-edged sword around that like kind of autonomy piece.
Maybe it's time to disrupt the design industry and like get, do away with that sort of, not do away with career progression, but I mean like facilitate that journey in a different way.
Yeah.
So that people can still, reach their potential without having to do it in such a defined way.
I think particularly in, we're kind of going a little bit off your question here.
Please do.
I think particularly in the sort of this weird hierarchy that starts to form where people start like land grabbing for power, which is where I think it becomes destructive when it's like UI is like you do the buttons, then UX you show how they all sit together, and then CX and then service, and then there's like an argument between like, well that's not true CX and that's not blah 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 blah. But the point is we're supposed to be like collaborating right now. So I think that is weird, and the other thing that's weird is trying to necessarily earn more money. People want to earn more money, get paid more for their experience, which I obviously support. But we tend to try and force the best among us into like leadership roles, and
that's a thing.
And out of makers. So you go from an individual contributor to being like a manager, and that's not necessarily the thing that you're going to love. So that's
or your skill set.
That's right.
Which is sometimes how you end up with really bad managers because they don't have the skills required. They'd be amazing gun on the tools or whatever. It's so creative, but don't understand how to manage people. So there's got to be career progression for those people too, without forcing them up that.
You should be able to earn the same and be rewarded the same for just being the world's greatest designer,
absolutely,
as being a leader, because as you said, not only do the best say designers, but it's probably the same in all fields, not only do they sometimes not make great leaders, but it's likely that they won't make a great leader, specifically because they're good at the job, because they're faster than young people, they're naturally intuitive about the program. So when they're like estimating things in their head and designing programs, they're like cutting corners and seeing things that other people can't see. And if they're a real individual contributor, then that's going to be super frustrating to them.
Yes. Just in terms of your question, like product designer, UI, UX designer, I find the membranes between titles just getting super thin.
Right.
And what I like, I see at Fjord anyway, there's a lot of people are sort of, and I'm sure it happens naturally, obtaining skills by osmosis. And I think, it to what you were saying before, I mean, like sometimes I think it'd be a great world if everyone was just a designer and contribute, their skills as, but without labeling, because we do tend to in the design industry really, I mean, 15 years ago UX designing didn't really exist. I mean, we're coming up with all of these new titles all the time, and more are being added. I just sometimes, as you said before, it's problem solving. It should be more about that than about titles, I think.
But to answer the question directly, I guess, rather than saying that I reject the premise of the question, which is sort of how I originally answered it, I think the difference for us is probably in reality just experience, I suppose. You're more likely to end up concentrating on the craft of the interface a bit more when you're a bit more junior here anyway. And then, you know, being encouraged to, because everyone presents you have to present your own work twice a week to the full client group here. So, you know, you're probably a bit more likely to stick with something that you're really comfortable with until you build a bit more experience, and because the team cuts up the work sort of interdisciplinary. So, you know, like a product manager might take on a bit of design, and a designer might take on like user testing or whatever. So you're sort of likely to stick a bit closer to the thing that you were trained at for the first little bit. And then as you learn things by osmosis and build, you know, confidence, then you go where your kind of like real self takes you, where you're like in like inherent skills and your interests take you. And then that turns you into more of this kind of like harder to pin down like product designer who has like business skills and product management skills and all those things.
Makes you really useful.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And someone makes you a manager and you're like, what?
Yeah.
And then you never get to do what you like.
Remind me of the Mitch Hedberg stand-up where he's like, great, you've been a comedian for so long, cool, can you farm? It's like, it's a totally different skills. Absolutely love it. Someone in the chat that's a visual designer moving into UI and UX, and I thought we might help them out and just say, you know, what advice might you have for someone that has a visual design background and they're looking to upskill in user interface, user experience in order to open up new opportunities?
Is that like a graphic designer? Like when you say visual
I'm going to say graphic designer for us.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you just guessing because you don't know?
I'm guessing because we got to guess.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
If I'm incorrect and it's visual designer means something else, feel free to jump in there, Ben.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we call people who design UI at Fjord BDs. So
Right.
Yeah. I mean,
because you'd see that a lot, right? Like through like there's short courses and things and self-taught people. There's a lot of graphic designers and visual designers and that sort of thing that do want to move into a space that is more digital. Like, is it possible? And
of
is
course
there?
it's possible. Yeah.
So how might they?
Well, in absence of doing any kind of discrete course, and there's many available. I mean, you can go and do it. I think. If you're a designer, I really feel like you're a bit of a sponge for the world, and that this learning by osmosis can happen anywhere. And we really are living in the age now where if you are so inclined, you can teach yourself anything.
Right.
And I don't think it needs to be formal, but I think you need to have a really good eye for quality in visual design to move into the digital space. I mean, and that's just basically, I mean, you can't help but be consuming digital designed products all the time. I mean, you go to the internet, you're looking at stuff that's been designed. And I think it's fairly easy to kind of look at something because you do it with visual design anyway. You might need to design a book. You look at other books for reference. You know, if you want to move into the digital space, you look at digital stuff for reference. And it's kind of, you just learn these things and you know intuitively what's good if you're a good visual designer. So, yeah, you literally can learn anything on the internet.
Have you had people come into your team or teams around you at Fjord who had a visual design background and then kind of have just sort of found themselves working in more of a service design? I know service design is a bit different, but
we've got designers of all backgrounds. We've actually got two ex-industrial designers.
What is it with industrial designers? Just like really understanding how things work.
Yeah, they're great.
Yeah, they totally are.
That's what you're looking for.
Right, I was right, by the way. Ben's a graphic designer. So.
Ben?
Yeah, I mean, I think I totally agree with all that, and I think just doing it is the important part.
Yeah.
Like having run a school, a design school before for some time, and taught at it as well with Flynn.
Yeah, we did.
Which was an
taught
amazing.
there too.
Yes, you did.
Didn't we? That was an amazing experience, and what I learned running that course and running the studio in the however long that's been, 5 or so years since then, is that I think doing is the real learning. And I think like there is, I mean, depending on where you live in the world and all those sorts of things, there is almost certainly a job available for you somewhere in digital, like right now.
Yeah.
Right.
More so than graphic design, I would have thought.
I would have thought, with the skills that you probably already have.
Yeah.
And, you know, whether it's, you know, just doing it in your own time or better yet, just do it. If that's the thing that you want to do, just go get a job at a place that's got a mindset similar to your own, that you get along with the people there, and, you know, be honest with where you're at. And, as I said, we hire from Mindset First, and there's tons of places just like that who would love someone who's just passionate, and we'll figure it out together.
Yeah.
We'll find like the right project for you, and then we'll build it up together. I think lots of courses are available, and I think that stuff's more about like building up your own confidence, but you'll learn more in the first month on the job than you do in any course over any given amount of time.
Well, let's be real. Design as an industry, we are all learning this together because it's changing so rapidly. Introduction of new technologies and all that kind of stuff. You're literally relearning your own role every few years.
Yeah,
I
exactly
feel.
right.
So I think if there are people out there going, I don't know anything about this thing that's so immutable and will never change, and I need to learn everything there is to know about that thing before I can approach them and say I want to work here. That I think just be buoyed by the fact that
Making it up as they're going.
exactly, and the industry is going to look nothing like it does today in 3 years.
It's changed so much, hasn't it, in the last couple of years?
And that's exactly it. So if you
And
present,
it's accelerating.
if you put yourself forward as like a super polished product designer, in some ways that's concerning for some places versus putting yourself forward as someone that's unbelievably passionate about learning new things.
Yeah.
Right.
Like if that becomes your skill, then
Curiosity is one of the biggest traits I think that you should be looking for in a new hire.
Fantastic advice. I hope that helps. It's kind of sparked another kind of question it's a statement, but we're going to turn it into a question. Someone in the chat said product designer, but they're struggling to prepare their portfolio because all of their work is confidential.
Oh, I know this one.
This is a good one,
I know
right?
this- yeah, I know this one as well.
we've got designer friends as well that might be working somewhere. They've been working there for 3, sometimes even more years, and they can't show anything they've produced. So, so like, have you run into this thing? Do you have any advice? Do you have any solutions to this kind of thing? It's a hard one.
We have a bit of a process when we hire somebody to sort of circumvent that problem a little bit, and where we set incoming or applicants a task to do. So it gives you a kind of
wow.
Yeah, it's actually quite stringent. We give them a brief and we give them 3 days to complete it, so we can see their process and everything, because that sort of allows everyone to. Because yes, obviously some people are a bit sort of hamstrung by what they can show or what they can't. So it's a very onerous process, and it does really put a lot of responsibility onto the applicant. But we're consistently surprised with the quality in what comes back when we do this. So that's one way of doing it. Yes, probably in the case of a visual designer, probably want to see some examples of their aesthetic, before we get to that stage.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I think it's it's really about a chat and establishing that mindset premise you were talking about earlier, is figuring out what kind of person is this and what can they bring.
Yeah.
So
I think there's always a way. I mean, it's so difficult for us. Like, we're begging clients to let us hint that we were involved in stuff. And the better the work, the more likely that's going to be the case in reality, because people are paying a lot for it, and it was mission critical to them, and it's important that their team and their business can take the credit for that, and also it might not be live yet and all that kind of stuff, which obviously we totally understand. So what I've seen ex-team members that work here do, and some stuff that we've done, is to pull apart those designs to demonstrate really specific skills and to anonymize them, to describe them as working for Big Four bank or whatever
which is
it
what
is.
your case study ends up usually looking like.
And to describe, so you end up breaking it apart into here is a problem that I solved and the way I went about solving it, because that's a really important part. And then you want to show that you're a maker if that's the case, which is probably the harder part. So then you can start breaking apart and anonymizing some of the actual pieces, and showing them and showing the care that you took to create them by sort of heroing button interactions or some kind of flow or something, and just breaking it down. I think we're well and truly past the stage, probably when I went to uni, about you want Nike's logo on the on the thing, or the big logo.
The logo slide.
Yeah, it's not about that.
Everyone worked for Unilever. That's not impressive.
Yeah.
They have every product.
Yeah, everything. Everyone's worked on something, but it's not about that. So I don't think it matters whether it was the biggest kind of company in the world or a smallish one.
Right.
The point is, what did you make? Was it great? Did you understand what you were making and do a good job of it?
What was the problem you solved? Yeah.
And that I suppose comes back to when you're actually having the physical interview with someone, or video chat as well, and saying, cool, great, can you explain this project and what you did and your role in it and how you work with other people? And that's how you pick out some more of those details.
Yeah, for sure.
Great, really like it.
But I feel the question is pain though.
Feel the pain. Have another question. Thanks, chat. We're here for about another 10 minutes, so if there's any more questions, throw them in. How do you interview someone to determine whether they have a suitable mindset? So, what is that interview process?
So we have a bit of we have an interview process that we call the tortoise and the hare. So it's a series of questions designed to understand whether people are more likely to act or consider, and those are not better or worse qualities. One is just the thing that we're looking for. Yeah. Well, I mean, for us, we're looking for hares. We're looking for people who want to act. We want people who success to them is not to collect and communicate facts, but to collect and act on facts, to build, to make, to launch. Because we go all the way from strategy to launching things, and we want people who live that whole journey. So we talk to people about a bunch of different things. I can't remember them all off the top of my head, but about it. We talk to them about what they do outside of work a lot. What they see their role as a designer as being, and what they consider great process. Because for us, great process is being really flexible and sticking to frameworks, not processes. So we're trying to avoid people who are really passionately, interested in like a traditional double diamond approach that want to go through. And I think those people are amazing, and I often end up referring those to like agencies that we know and other friends and stuff. But we're looking for that specific type of mindset, and we just ask questions that we know. Well, we think we know, give us a good understanding of where people sit there. Because what we're looking for is people who, as you said earlier, Prue, can get started really quickly, and we're not going to have to try and retrain their mindset, because that's like a cruel thing to do to someone.
Right.
We don't want them to be in a situation where they feel like this isn't the thing that I thought design is or think design is. So it kind of fights that diversity thing we were speaking about earlier in a way, because you're sort of like building a group of people that are really like-minded. Yeah. But that's how we do it.
Yeah.
More thoughts?
Oh, just experience, knowing when you can cut corners. I mean, being wedded to the process, I think, and that is madness at times, because if you've done something enough times and you can see what the outcome's going to be, you may as well just go straight there. Except in the case of when you have maybe stakeholders involved who aren't familiar, and they're making those kind of assumptions about things. And I sometimes think that design thinking has gone a little bit that way, and sometimes can produce outcomes that aren't as interesting or as efficacious, can I say, as the kind of approach that you're talking about, where you're sort of pushing things because you need to, out of necessity, to get somewhere. And then when you've launched something, then you get your learnings and all of that sort of stuff. It's a continuous process. But sometimes you can speed up the getting there. I really do think that. And how that relates to employment opportunities, I'm not sure.
Oh, okay.
So.
Great.
Okay, we're going to switch topics. So if there's any more questions, now's probably the time for them to come through in time for us to ask. But I'll continue on with my one. This is a question that might have come up in yours, about entry-level designers, maybe Tara, so you don't have to pretend that you know. Just about entry designers being more ethical in recent years.
I feel like this question is implying that that entry-level designers at some time were not ethical.
Maybe. So I guess...
I'm not really sure.
So it might have been the context what we're talking about. So I'll explain that. Unless...
I'm just like ethical as people. You mean
I
more
guess
conscious of ethics is maybe the root of the question.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, yes. I think so. And also, like even just as designers, I think just people and younger people. I mean, we saw the... just in Sydney and globally, the marching on Friday.
Climate
I know that
strike.
the climate strike, mentally friendly, like shut down, like for the day. You guys were all out there and sort of getting involved. And I'm not saying that there weren't people our age and other ages like doing this sort of thing as well, but it does seem to be like quite a movement towards like buying ethical products and even things to super, like people wanting to move their super to a company that is ethical and aligns with their values. So I guess the jumping off point for this is, are you feeling that change?
Well, yeah, I mean, like that's the positioning of our studio. Like we work on human value projects. So like for us, that's the type of talent that we attract. But I think definitely we're seeing the sophistication of thought quite high in really young people, which is like exciting. I think, probably in design, it's always been the case. I think that people are quite idealistic, but the awareness of how that plays into and the role that they have in teams or should have in teams is definitely I sense that it's increasing. I think also probably just more generally design has a bigger seat at the table than it did previously.
Right.
So you hear more about design and service design and
or design thinking being embedded in organisations
those sorts of
as
things,
a framework.
So I think that all those things put together, and also the kind of heightening urgency of social issues, probably all together does end up with a slightly more passionate, slightly more informed young person.
Yeah. For me, this question really ties into a Fjord trend from this year called the last straw. And that's really exactly what you were talking about.
I might bring that up as a visual, because I actually have the Fjord trends. And maybe for those that weren't here, look at the accept cookies. So, keeping it all
GDPR,
kosher and everything, GDPR. This is the Fjord trends. Do you want to just explain what this is first, and then you can talk
what Fjord trends are?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So Fjord release a series of trends every year, which look at predicting trends in design and technology 12 to 18 months out from release. And this is this year's. And I think you had the last straw there. The way that we actually, it's not like we pluck these out of thin air. We have a network of 1,000 designers around the world, and every single designer within Fjord is tasked with putting these together. So as at the studio level, we come together and pitch the trends we see in our own sort of areas or globally, and then it gets synthesized by a central team who kind of tease out what they feel. These are the thought leaders at Fjord, what they feel might be right based on everything that people have submitted. But the last straw, I've presented this trend to a couple of groups of predominantly young people, and the level of distress that is out there is really quite, and I have a 12-year-old son as well, and I can see this is very raw in young people, and justifiably so. So this trend is really all about, have we really reached that tipping point where now this must be the first consideration when you're designing anything. We have our metrics of desirability, viability, feasibility, but what about environmentally as well? Like how well do designs stack up on that matrix? It's about time that we really started to consider that just as part of every design, as we would UX, UI, anything else. We actually had somebody visit recently who's into environmental design, and I was stunned to learn that every time you do a Google search, it's the equivalent of boiling your kettle, which I think...
Electricity usage.
Yeah, energy. Right. And also, to design a website that is all white uses much more energy to display than a black screen with white text. So small considerations like that, these are the metrics that we should be thinking about. But the last straw is a great trend, I think. I think we hope we have seen the last straw, plastic straw. So if anyone's interested in that, they should definitely go and check that out, and the rest of the trends as well.
Yeah, so this is publicly available, isn't it?
Absolutely,
so I can't drop it into the chat right now.
Yep.
Yes. Every time you load.
Yeah, exactly.
Every time you load the website.
Trends.fjordnet.com.
Ferry loses its wings. Trends.fjord.com. Yeah.
Fjordnet.
Fjordnet.com. Thank you.
That's right.
So yeah, you can check that out now. But hey, that takes us pretty much to time. And I wanted to thank you both for your presentations and your talk and spending time with me earlier today.
It's always a pleasure.
It's been, absolutely. It's been fantastic. I thought we might just bring up our schedule, which is now our schedule that has come and gone Big thank yous to Joe Ortenzi, the leader of IXDA here in Sydney. He's got an event on tonight, who kicked us off. Nick, who's with me now, was on at 9:30. Pin Athwell came through. All of this content is going to be available on demand on Behance and on the Creative Cloud YouTube channel as well. So Pin did some amazing stuff, prototyping in Adobe XD. Tara Van Amerongen from Fjord. From us too, excuse me, getting things mixed up now. Looking at the trends. She was at Fjord though, in my defense.
She was.
That was amazing. The lovely Prue, who's with me now. Jamie and Jason from Adobe, thank you so much for coming in and doing some Adobe XD for us. And Jai from Google as well, which is amazing. And the roundtable, here we are.
Thank you.
It's been a big day. Like to thank our production team here. So Harrison and Streaming House team, Johanna and Alex and Aileen, Jonathan, everybody that's been involved. Thank you all for joining us in chat, whether you just caught the end here because you're here to see Rufus and Stephanie, the European team, kick off their day. Good morning, Europe, and good afternoon, Sydney. And thank you all. See you next time.
Thank you.